COVID-19 has left us with more questions than answers since life as we know it changed in March. But with vaccines about to come on stream, hope is on the horizon, even though case numbers are still rising. However, when it comes to youth sports, we don't know what the long-term effects of this pandemic will be or where to go from here. And now is the time to have that conversation. Sport in the pandemic, where do we go from here? Our panelists, Stephanie Dixon, the chef de mission for Team Canada at the 2021 Paralympic Games in Tokyo. Marco Di Buono is the Associate Vice President of Program and Operations for Canadian Tire Jumpstart Charities, and Jenn Heil, co-founder of B210, a private organization dealing with high-performance sport, and a consultant to Via Sport BC looking into abuse and harassment in sport. All right, here's the bottom line. Through the pandemic, pools and gymnasiums and playgrounds have been closed. So Marco, what needs to be done?
That's a great question, Scott. I think there are a lot of factors at play here. First and foremost, we need to convey the message when things are safe, that it's going to be safe for participants to come back, whether that means continuing with some of the physical distancing measures or whether it means coming back to the way it was prior to the pandemic once the vaccine is rolled out. We need to convince Canadians, 47% of whom believe that they're going to wait 3 to 6 months after the vaccine is rolled out to even consider coming back to sport, that it's okay to go back. And we need to invest in community sport because it has been hurt badly by all of the economic ramifications that COVID has left in its wake.
Through this, have our children learned to be more resilient, or have they just become more isolated?
Well, probably a little bit of both. As a mother to two young boys, a 5 and a 7-year-old, I see the impact on the pandemic, the fear, the challenges for them. In BC, where we are, we've been quite lucky. And so sport has continued in a modified way. And it's also been shut down and opened again various times. And each time my kids participate, I see their confidence go up. I see their happiness go up. And as a parent, I'm managing in the household much better because the energy levels are down.
Ken Dryden, the great hockey goaltender, had a great line in his first book called Home Game. He referred to something called the magic of play. What has happened to the magic of play during the pandemic? Because we've been told by so many people that you're forbidden to play. What happened?
You know, Scott, I think if anything, we are going to appreciate the magic of play more, because I don't think we really appreciate things as much when it's just always there. And so now that we've had it taken away from us and we see the void in all of our lives, I think we're all feeling it. I think that one, we're going to appreciate the magic of play more because right now, I think we're finally recognizing how important it is for all of us. And I think that when sport starts to get back to normal again, I truly believe that we will build back better and not take it for granted and maybe focus a bit more on that joy and the magic that movement and sport brings to all of us and to make sure it is accessible to every Canadian.
We have heard stories about so many organizations that are in need. They've had to go through budget cuts. They can't afford to pay their leaders and those supervisors. What is the scope of this? How big is the need that you've seen?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's really big. And you can appreciate that with the government having all kinds of other priorities, this has largely gone unaddressed. We know that upwards of half of community sport organizations have closed their doors almost permanently. They're not going to plan to open until well into 2021. Consider, though, that 40% of all community sport organizations are largely or entirely run by volunteers. Those are moms and dads and caregivers and just adults in communities who've been really largely concerned with taking care of their own health and well-being. And so many of them have opted out and likely won't come back to sustain the operations of their community sport organizations. You're going to see an increase in the cost of participation that's unprecedented. And you're going to see a lack of supply, quite frankly, because there aren't as many organizations that will be around to provide those magic moments that Stephanie referred to for families across the country. So this is going to have longstanding consequences that will go on for several years unless we start to invest systematically into bringing sport back better.
Do you see the effects of this as changing sport forever? Or will we just go on out of this?
We're at a crossroads, we're at a tipping point, and that answer depends on Canadians. For those of us that have always had sport in our lives and have seen it taken away, I'd say we value it more. But only 20% of Canadians consider themselves sporty. So what about the other 80%? How do we design for them? How do we make sport more inclusive? How do we get sport to the policy tables of health, of education, of transportation? I mean, those of us that value sport, we know the benefits that it has in communities for engagement, for health, for improved, school marks. The list is endless. The science has shown us. But I don't think that change of building back better is going to come from inside the community. We need leaders to know how important it is that sport brings us together. It improves mental, physical, emotional health, community cohesion. And until we're at those bigger policy tables, I don't think we can build back sport better. I think we're going to be still delivering a good product, but not to the level that all of us here, I think, believe that sport can and should be playing in our country.
Some of the most at-risk people in all of this are people from marginalized communities. Do you believe that we can make sport more adaptive going forward, more accessible? Are we going to make sport more inclusive as a result of this? I guess I'm asking, might there be some positive outcomes from what we've been through?
Scott, I'm hopeful. I'm very, very hopeful that we will take this opportunity to learn, to reflect, to dissect our sports system, to dissect the health of Canadians and which Canadians are being left out. We want to make sport and health and movement accessible to everybody. So I'm a very, very proud Jumpstart ambassador. Jumpstart is a program that catches the kids that fall between the cracks. Whether, you're coming from a low-income family, you have a disability, you're a high-risk youth, Jumpstart provides funding and sporting opportunities for those kids. But to me, it saddens me that any kid is falling through the cracks. While I'm a very proud Jumpstart ambassador, I hope someday there's no need for it because all kids are being taken care of at a very, very fundamental level.
Marco, the public priority and anything you see on the sporting news is about whether or not the NHL is going to go back to play, or the NBA, or professional sport, or high performance sport. And yet there isn't as much conversation about sport at the grassroots level. Does that concern you?
It does, and particularly because, well, first and foremost, we won't have an NHL for long or high performance sports for long if we don't invest in this generation of kids and participants who are interested in participating now. But secondly, and to the point Jennifer made, this is not just about sport for the sake of high performance and podium finishes. This is about allowing kids to be their better selves. It's about helping them work through the trauma that COVID has introduced into their lives by the social interaction that sport can create, the mentorship and guidance that a coach who cares about them can create. It's about building more resilient kids through participation in sport in the way we've known to do as a country for decades. That's the real opportunity here. So I do hope that Canadians, particularly parents who've been at home, will take a step back and realize that movement, play, that magic that we spoke about earlier that is created through sport is more important than getting our professional athletes up and running right now.
Jenn, so much in the news these days about whether or not sport is a safe place, as we all hope it will be. Is sport safe enough? Is it free from harassment, abuse, or do we have work to do going forward?
Yeah, I mean, as a huge advocate of sport that's completely shaped my life, it does pay me to say no, it's not safe enough today. I think we're working towards it. We know that the way that we weren't protecting our youth from abuse, harassment, physical injuries, all of the above is no longer acceptable. But we're making a change and we need to stay focused. And unfortunately, this takes resources to build back better. It does take resources. It does take, a lot of change, which is really uncomfortable. So as leaders, we need to be willing to say, we're not going to get it all right in day one, in year one, but we need to work towards putting these structures in place, and making those difficult decisions and taking risk, knowing that it's not going to be a perfect system, but it's going to be better.
This was much easier to deal with coming out of the winter. We're going into the winter. Do you see the challenge as not yet over?
There's a lot that the grassroots sport movement has learned, and they learned in the early stages of this. Many of them reinvented themselves, and they quickly tried to funnel some of their resources to creating safe spaces online, notwithstanding some of the challenges that many kids have accessing online resources, but they created safe spaces online so that at least they could engage with their participants and provide some safe options for movement and play in a digital delivery format. Grassroots sport organizations have already stepped up to the challenge of COVID. They did so in the first wave, and they reinvented the way that they delivered their product to continue providing kids with all those opportunities to be their better selves. And there's no doubt that they will use those learnings to continue being resilient in the face of this winter that we're about to head into. And when we emerge in the spring, they will have an opportunity to come back, build back stronger, and start to get kids active again in a more traditional format, getting back outside and so on. But I have faith in the organizations that have survived this first long wave of the pandemic, that they will continue to meet the needs of kids, albeit in different ways.
It has been said that sport is the universal language. If we all feel it is so important, how do we get it to every kid that needs it? And to that end, is it your feeling that we need help in this regard? Should sport be delivered at least partially through our school system where it is available to every child that needs it?
There's a lot of barriers to sport and to organized sport. So, transportation, the makeup of a single family household, dual incomes, the time crunch that all of this puts on. And so the most obvious solution is, why wouldn't you deliver sport where children already are, which is in the school and in the early childhood care centers. We know that if kids don't learn how to move and build the confidence to move before 9 years old, that they don't have a great chance of being physically active for their whole life and then passing it on to their own children. So it's pretty critical that we get to these kids in the environments where they're at. And so education and early child care centers are definitely the key in this.
Well, I completely agree. And, Jennifer's made a great point. And I absolutely think that it does need to be a priority in our school system. It's such a large task to provide movement and physical activity to every Canadian child that we're going to need to tackle it from so many different angles and from different organizations, because not all schools are accessible. Not all playgrounds are accessible. And so I think that we need to tackle it from a lot of different standpoints. I mean, even just having stronger regulations around buildings and accessibility, universal accessibility. If it's not happening, then, if there is a gym class, a child can't participate, they're going to be sitting out. So, we need to have in the school system it being a priority. And then we need to tackle our infrastructure and make sure that every child has the physical access and then the emotional inclusion to participate in these programs.
Marco, last word on this goes to you. Do we need a pan-Canadian approach to delivering sport to our young people?
We absolutely do. And I would add two things to what Jenn and Stephanie have already mentioned. We need to stop thinking about sport as this linear construct of, national sport org to provincial to clubs within communities. We have schools, as we've mentioned, but we also have parks and recreation. We need to think about all of these assets as a real ecosystem where kids can thrive if we leverage all of the resources and investments that these various parts of the sports system are making, we need to stop treating them independently. Sport Canada should govern all of it with concerted investments to make sure kids are being active where they want to be active. And the second thing is that we need to stop thinking about sport as an entity unto itself. Sport can very much be used as a tool to improve health and well-being. So think about investments from ministries of health or the healthcare sector. It can be used as a tool for pro-social behavior, social and emotional learning. So how do we get investments from other areas of society to make sure that we're leveraging sport as a tool, again, to be our better selves, to build back better? It's not just about funding sport for the sake of sport participation. This is about using sport as a tool to achieve all kinds of very important outcomes that we as Canadians truly hold dear.
Getting back to sport through the pandemic. Thanks so much to all of our panelists, Stephanie Dixon, Marco de Buono, Jenn Heil. Have a great holiday season and stay safe.